Welcome to Man in America, a voice of reason in a world gone mad. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. The situation with the war in Iran is accelerating, and it's getting, honestly, quite frightening. Not just because of what's happening in the Middle East, but because of the ripple effect of what we're seeing around the world. Now, whether you think that this Iran war is part of some globalist agenda to bring about the acceleration of the human race into this Agenda 2030, where we've got 15-minute cities and lockdowns and climate issues, all those things, whether you think it's a globalist plan or whether you think it's just the natural thing that's happening because of the Strait of Hormuz being shut, because of the hit on all the energy plants, etc. It doesn't matter what the reason is behind it, because what we're seeing happen is exactly that. We're seeing that the world is changing very rapidly, and there are a lot of indicators that what we're heading into could be something like a COVID 2.0. Now, look, I don't want to be a fearmongerer. I'm not a black pillar. I'm actually a really happy guy. But if you remember back when COVID hit early on, say 2020, a lot of people were warning. They were saying, look, this is a big deal, all right? And there's a lot of people that just said, no, it's not. Just trust the government. It's 2 weeks to slow the spread. We'll get through it. But we saw that COVID was actually a globally coordinated plan to rapidly advance the human race towards this Agenda 2030 agenda. And so we have to be sober and look at these things. And hopefully, I hope these things don't play out. I hope that this war ends and there's no more innocent lives being lost. But we just don't know exactly what's going to happen. And so today's show is going to be in two parts. The first part, which I'll be very kind of rapid fire getting through this, is looking at the overall situation right now. What are the things I'm watching? What concerns me? Where are we seeing the indicators and patterns of some sort of globalist agenda rolling out? What are we seeing here happen on American soil? There's a lot that's happening here that's quite alarming. So I'll look at that. And then the second half of this is that's just a distraction. I'm not saying that people that are just covering that are compromised or evil or bad people, but in my opinion, they're not doing their duty, which is warning the people and staying on top of these things and helping people to understand the threats that are coming. And I look at that as my job as a podcaster. I've got a large reach. I reach millions of people every month. And I really look at it as my goal to try to be the watchman, to try to say, hey, look, I'm on the watchtower. I see there's enemies out there. They're coming, right? They're coming. So we got to prepare for that. That's part of how I look at my job. So she continues, people deserve to know the truth and at a bare minimum have someone attempt to warn them about the need to prepare for food shortages, energy shortages, water scarcity, comms, etc. The times we are living in are no joke, and the main job of people with a platform is to care about the people who take time out of their precious lives to listen to all of us in earnest. In Australia, people are already stealing fuel from others' cars. This is a first world country resorting to theft after a very short period thus far of scarcity. None of us in the West have ever lived through real food shortages. I mean, I think most people haven't. Nobody is accustomed to being truly starving. Desperate people tend to do bad things to one another. I hope and pray it doesn't come to that, but there are people out there who do not love their neighbor like some of us do. And the reality is, and I agree with her last point there, but I'll say something, is that even if you love your neighbor, this is where it gets scary. If a father has a starving family, then it's unfortunate, but the protective nature that emerges, especially of a father, the head of a household, or of a mother, a mama bear, they will do whatever it takes to make sure that their children are safe. And so if someone has starving kids at home, they might resort to things that they never would be doing in normal time. And so just be wary of that. Okay, I'm not saying turn on your neighbor or become suspicious, but just be aware of how things happen. If you look at history, you look at what happens during times of extreme food shortages, extreme times of war, of famine, you can see that human behavior changes drastically. And unfortunately, what happens is that it resorts to a much more base, primal, survival level of thinking. So just be aware of that. So continuing, this is looking at Australia. Again, remember, Australia is the testing ground. So Australia, this is a post from Jim Ferguson. Fuel shortages hit Australia, crime already rising. Australia is starting to feel the pressure. Reports show criminals are siphoning petrol from cars on the streets, 164 petrol stations without diesel, Supply disruptions pushing food prices higher. This is how it begins. Fuel shortages don't stay at the pump. That's the key, okay? When fuel shortages happen, when fuel prices spike, everything else gets more expensive and more scarce. And that's even in a normal time, right? In a relatively normal time. But here we've got a lot of these things that are stacked on top of each other, okay? He continues, they spread, transport slows, deliveries drop, prices rise, crime follows. So in Australia, businesses are already cutting deliveries. Some goods are arriving only twice a week instead of daily. And the officials are now openly discussing fuel rationing. This is not chaos, but it is the early stage of breakdown. Because when fuel becomes unstable, everything else follows. And that's what's happening in Australia today. It can happen anywhere next. He has a news report on there that I'm not going to play for you because he did a good job summarizing it. But it's not just Australia that we're seeing this. We just saw in Philippines, the president of Philippines has just declared a national energy emergency. Okay. South Korea has just announced mandatory fuel rationing. So government vehicles at public institutions are barred from operating one day each week on a 5-day license plate rotation. So again, South Korea they've now announced mandatory fuel rationing. So he says that South Korea imports 73 to 83% of its oil from the Middle East. Every barrel transits through the Strait of Hormuz. That strait is closed. So this is natural reaction. So this is very serious. Okay, EU. So Slovenia becomes the first EU country to introduce fuel rationing. So what we're seeing the early signs of this. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me, and I hope it doesn't happen, but within the next couple of weeks, we might see the same thing happening in America, where they come out and they say, look, hey, it's your patriotic duty to support the war. As we've already seen, there's these propaganda campaigns. Hey, short-term pain for long-term gain. It's your patriotic duty to pay more for the pump to support the war, to protect us from nuclear bombs. You're seeing the same campaigns happen over and over again. So would this be coming to the United States or other Western countries? I think there's a very good chance of it. Now, that's just looking at what's happening with the fuel, but there are some other things that are happening that are maybe independently. You could look at these things and say, okay, maybe in isolation, that's not an abnormal event. But when you look at some of the other things that are happening, especially here on U.S. soil, it's easy to see that there's a pattern and that this points to some sort of larger campaign of creating instability. The timing of this is too difficult to ignore. Like it's kind of crazy. So right now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but one of the nation's largest forest fires is actually happening, or wildfires is happening right now. So I'll first show you a little bit of the video of it down here. So this is in Nebraska. I'm not sure if you've heard about this. It's not getting a whole lot of coverage, but there is a massive wildfire that is just absolutely decimating Nebraska. So let me read a little bit about this. Okay, this is from MJ Truth. Great guy. He does a lot of wonderful content. Recommend you follow him. He says, America is under attack under the guise of climate change. So nearly 1 million acres are on fire in Nebraska, the largest in state history, and the ranchers are devastated. So this is what's key, okay? Because you look at the indicators that show that there are different levels of attacks that will be affecting our supply chain, our food supply, energy supply, etc. What he says here is that the fires have burned critical sand hills, prairie, and grazing land that's supporting between 35,000 and 40,000 head of cattle. So Nebraska is the number 2 U.S. cattle producing state. So it's destroyed fencing, stockpiled hay, and some structures. Livestock deaths appear minimal, but herds are displaced. Long term, soil sterilization in spots that may require reseeding. Ranchers are facing multi-year rebuilds, and the recovery of native grassland could take years. Many ranchers are now seeking alternative pasture, supplemental feed, or forced sales. This is the key part here. Bottom line, it hits the ranchers hard. Livelihood and operation, and ripples into the U.S. beef supply and food prices at a vulnerable time. He says this is part of a globalist plan, which I happen to agree with. Now, that's just one thing. This is the big thing. Okay, this is when I saw this, I think it was last night, I saw this news come out. This is what made my stomach churn. We know that in the back and forth between the U.S. and Iran, that Trump is making threats. He's giving them ultimatums. Iran is likewise countering. They're not backing down. They're actually stepping up. Trump tries to negotiate peace. Israel then goes and bombs. It creates this doom cycle where at every step, regardless of what kind of external pressure there is to dial things back, it keeps accelerating. So Iran has specifically said that we're going to start targeting energy infrastructure. Now, this right here, okay, this is the Valero Port Authority Refinery. It's one of the largest refineries in the United States. Okay, so let me, I'll play a couple of these videos. Okay, this is the refinery. Don't need the extra sound there. Okay, so that refinery is up in flames. So let me give some details of what happened. So the Valero Port Authority Refinery is one of the largest in the United States. The facility processes roughly 395,000 barrels of crude oil per day, making it a critical piece of America's fuel supply chain. So Port Arthur sits along the Gulf Coast refining corridor that handles nearly half of all U.S. refining capacity. This comes at the worst possible time. The Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed. Iraq declared force majeure on all of its oil production. The Qatar's LNG hub is damaged. Global crude is above $100 a barrel. It says in the U.S. just authorized sales of Iranian and Russian oil to keep markets from spiraling further. Even a temporary shutdown of a facility this size tightens domestic fuel supply at a moment where Americans are already paying $3.90 plus at the pump. If repair takes weeks, gas prices in the Gulf Coast region could spike ahead of the rest of the country. So there's just some various videos here. Basically what happened is, I think it was late yesterday, there was a massive explosion at this oil processing facility. Okay. There's lots of different videos where you can see this happening. You can see the explosion. I mean, it was a massive, massive explosion. They've told residents to shelter in place as this huge fire burns. Okay, so this was kind of late yesterday where this explosion happened. Now, is this just a coincidence? Okay, these things do happen. Okay, even during times of peace, there are still a handful of explosions that happen at these refining locations every year in America. It's dangerous. There tend to be potential things that can happen, safety violations, whatever it is, that can cause this to happen. So you might ask yourself, okay, look, does this relate to Iran? Does it relate to the war? Or is it just a coincidence? Now, I don't want to just be one that says, hey, everything's a conspiracy. Okay, so let's look at Felix Ammunition, who was highlighting this. So he's commenting on it. There's another video. You can see the smoke was billowing from the refinery in Port Arthur, Texas, following the reports of an explosion. So Felix Ammunition, who says, could be terrorism, but more likely an industrial accident. He says that when all of a sudden oil's $98 a barrel and you're running these 3 shifts 24/7, possibly with a bunch of new hires in various roles, things go wrong very easily. When things go wrong in an oil refinery, you're almost guaranteed to have a fire at a minimum, often an explosion. The only question is how big it will be and how expensive it will be. Usually pretty big, and usually the hundreds of millions, plus potentially years of time lost in cleanup and reconstruction. So again, he's making a valid point in saying that, yes, this could have been a pure accident. It could have been that with the oil prices spiking, that they're running 3 shifts around the clock, new hires, it's easy for things to go wrong. That's potentially true. But when you take a look back and you look at all the things happening, you look at Iran threatening to take out oil infrastructure or energy infrastructure in the countries that are involved in attacking it, whether it is the allies that we have over in the Gulf over in the Middle East, or whether it is our own nation, things are heating up. They're getting pretty serious. Now, here's what's crazy about this. I'd be willing to say maybe it was an accident. I'd be more likely to say, though, that given the timing, given the back and forth between Iran and Trump, it's more than likely not an accident. Now, am I saying that it was Iran? Maybe not. I mean, it could have been our own military that did this. Okay, I'm not saying our own our own troops and everything, but it could have been our own agencies. It could have been Israel. It could have been some sort of false flag event. We don't know who's doing these things. And I think that a lot of times these instances are examples of false flag events, right? So as much as they're going to blame it on the Iranians, just like they're blaming 9/11 on some terrorist that was CIA and, okay, hey, let's not go there, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, our world is being poisoned. Every day we're exposed to more chemicals sprayed into our skies, leaching into our food, and polluting our air and water. From pesticides and heavy metals to hormone disruptors and synthetic additives, these toxins are bombarding our bodies and silently destroying our health. But there's something you can do to fight back, and it starts in your gut. Kimchi 1 from Brightcore Nutrition contains over 900 strains of beneficial probiotics that will help flush toxins, restore gut balance, and support your immune system. Because when your gut is strong, your body can resist. You'll feel the difference. Better digestion, more energy, clearer thinking, stronger immunity, and even improvements in your skin, hair, and metabolism. And this isn't just hype. Studies show that fermented foods like kimchi can reduce the risk of obesity, improve blood sugar, and support whole body wellness. Kimchi 1 is all natural, non-GMO, dairy-free, gluten-free, and 100% made in the USA by a company that actually cares about your health. And today, you can get an exclusive offer just for my viewers, 25% off with your code MANINAmerica by clicking the link below. Or call my friends at Brightcore for up to 50% off your order and free shipping. So give them a call now at 888-575-6488, and their educated staff will make sure that Kimchi 1 is right for you. Again, that's 888-575-6488. All the links and information are in the description below. Anyway, I want to point this out to you, though. This is really, really crazy. So this is a post from Amuse who says, coincidence? A Saudi X account posted a specific threat against the Port Arthur Motiva refinery 1 hour before the nearby Valero explosion in the exact same city. He then deleted that post and all 4,700 of his previous tweets immediately afterwards. So this is crazy. Okay, so an hour before this explosion at the Port Arthur in Texas, this person, this Al Hiba, which has now deleted all of his tweets and people are trying to investigate and see who this person is, he put this post out an hour before it happened. He said, within a week, the largest gas refinery in the United States, Motiva Enterprises in the city of Port Arthur, Texas, on the Gulf Coast will be destroyed. Save the tweet. So now I've checked this. I've validated it. This was a real tweet. Sometimes you have these fake screenshots that people edit and they'll make it look like something, a screenshot was being shared, but you find out the tweet never actually happened. This was a real tweet. So again, an hour before the explosion on one of the most important and critical oil processing facilities in the United States, an hour before that happened, some random account on X that is his profile ties him back to Saudi Arabia, which could be anywhere. He could have been sitting in the Pentagon, right? You can use VPN to mask where you're actually at. You can make it look like you're anywhere. But what we know is that his account was presented as being from Saudi Arabia. So an hour before this attack, he puts this tweet out that says, within a week, the largest gas refinery in the U.S., the Motiva Enterprises in the city of Port Arthur, Texas, on the U.S. Gulf Coast will be destroyed. Save the tweet. So this is what makes me think that this wasn't just some random accident that happened. There's something behind this. Again, whether it was Iran, whether it was Israel, whether it was the CCP, whether it was our own CIA, I don't know who did it. We probably never will know. But you can't ignore the patterns and you can't ignore these signs that we're seeing. Now, on top of that, this is also extremely concerning. Okay, we're talking about what's happening here on domestic soil. This is a post from Geiger Capital who says, holy crap, unknown drones are now flying over our largest military bases on U.S. soil and we can't stop them. It's not an exaggeration to say we've been completely infiltrated at this point. Okay, now look at this. This is a post from an ABC News article. Now, keep in mind, this is during this war, okay? They said, between March 9th and 15th, 2026, the BAFB security forces observed multiple waves of 12 to 15 drones operating over sensitive areas of the installation, including the flight line, with aircraft displaying non-commercial signal characteristics, long-range control links, and resistance to jamming. Okay, so the flights lasted for around 4 hours each day, and the drones used varied routes of ingress and deliberate maneuvering within restricted airspace. So again, I think a lot of Americans think, hey, look, we're safe. This is America. They have a normalcy bias or a cognitive dissonance that makes you think that, hey, America's always going to be okay. This is America. We're the greatest empire ever on earth. We'll never have anything wrong happen here in America, which is that mentality, which I think has been purposefully bred into our population through social engineering, go back to Bernays, et cetera. That mentality is what has left a lot of Americans woefully unprepared. Is we think that because things have been normal in our life for a long time, that it will stay normal, right? They call that normalcy bias. You have a bias towards what's normal, but that normalcy bias can cause you to have massive blind spots when you're looking at potential threats to your own safety, your own homeland, et cetera. So again, what we're seeing here, if you look at the attack on the oil refinery or the explosion that might be an attack that has some weird things behind it, you look at the massive fires that are happening in Nebraska, wiping out critical farmland that is feeding the cows that feed our population. Then you look at this, that you have these drones that are unidentified drones that are resistant to jamming. Right? So these are drones flying over our own military bases that somehow we can't jam these drones. This is, again, it's easy to think, oh, America, our technology is so advanced and we're so superior. Well, we're not that superior because these drones are flying around critical Air Force bases and security bases, and we can't even stop them. And we have no idea what they're doing there. So again, these are just some indicators that there is some crazy stuff that's happening. And again, if you're family, if COVID didn't teach you about this, if these indicators haven't shown you something, I hope, if anything, that this can be a wake-up call that more Americans start to take preparedness more seriously. I don't know, I've been preparing pretty hardcore since 2020, so I feel relatively safe. I've got a lot of backup energy sources. I've got a lot of backup food, a lot of different preparations. But unfortunately, a lot of Americans don't live in that situation. A lot of Americans are living just in a big city or in the suburbs. Maybe they've got a couple of weeks worth of food left and that's it. Maybe they don't have backup energy. And look, the thing is that if you don't have backup energy, or if you're just relying on going to your faucet and turning on your faucet and getting drinking water, well, if the energy grid goes down, that drinking water disappears. So what happens if you can no longer get that drinking water from your own faucet and you don't have a well, you don't have any rainwater harvesting, you don't have access to natural water like a river, and you don't have ways of purifying that water? This is what creates absolute mass chaos. So I hope that people can just be very aware of this. Now, I just want to kind of show you a few things, that just a few pointers in terms of preparedness before I jump into the interview with Mike Adams, where I was on Mike Adams' show. One thing is, let me pull this up. I think the number one recommendation, if you want to understand preparedness, the first thing you need to do is just assess your own level of preparedness. Find your gaps, find your loopholes, right? Every family in America should be sitting down right now, having a conversation and saying, okay, if the grid goes down, if the supply chain gets attacked and grocery stores don't have food anymore, if any of these things happen, if we can't go get gas at the gas station, what are we going to do about it? What are our vulnerabilities? So something that I did is created a website where it's called readyscore.com. It's free. I'm not selling you a service for this. You can literally just go on there for free, readyscore.com. So what this is a family preparedness test. Okay, so what you do, there's two different tests I put on here. There's one which is an 11-question test, which will take about 2 minutes or so. And there's one that's a little bit longer, which will take you about 8 or 10 minutes. But it's a test. It's a very simple test. I'll show you how it works, okay? Basically, it allows you to find your gaps before crisis hits. The test covers these 11 key areas: water, food, energy and shelter, health and hygiene, communication, security, community, planning, mindset, finance, and location. So what you do, you go to readyscore.com, you click that button. Now, I've already started the test, so it kind of loaded my previous test results. But if you can kind of scroll back and forth, you go through here and you can take the test. You can choose, I already started, so it kind of gave me, I'm already in the 40-question test. But again, there's an 8-minute test and there's like a 2-minute test. You just go through and it just asks you questions, okay? Ask, where do you currently live? What's your mindset surrounding this? How much supplies do you have? How do you interact with your neighbors? So there's different questions on here that really help to assess what is your overall situation. Like here's one, for instance: if your stored water ran out, could you make water from natural sources safe to drink? It's a good question, right? So previous question for that. How many days of drinking water do you have stored for your entire household? Water is your most critical resource. The average person can survive only 3 days without it. Okay, how many days of drinking water do you have? You might say a few days worth. I've got some bottled water. Okay, now it says if your stored water ran out, could you purify natural water sources? You say, no, actually, I don't have any way of purifying water, right? Some people during these crises, like they literally have to walk 2 miles every day with buckets to bring water back to their homes. That's just how it works. But if you're going to a local river or a pond or whatever it is to get water, and if you're not purifying it, you're extremely vulnerable to waterborne illnesses. So here's a question. If your stored water runs out, can you purify it? So for me, I would say, yes, I'd say I have multiple redundant methods, plus I know proper techniques, right? Bleach ratios, boil times, etc. It gets into hygiene. So anyway, this is a test I highly recommend you just go do it. You can take a 2 minutes or 8 minutes. It gives you a full assessment once you finish. It gives you a ready score, and it says, okay, hey, these are your 3 critical areas, right? So these are the areas you should focus on first. So highly, highly recommend that. The other thing is that one of the important things, in addition to water, is looking at your food store. Okay, you have to be asking your question of how much food do I have stored? Now, maybe you've got a bunch of seeds for growing a garden. Hey, that's great. That's really good. But if you've never gardened before, I've spent many years gardening, and you've learned that it's not as easy as you think it is. So just having a bucket of seeds, while it's great for long term, it's really important. Like one thing that I've got is, I've got a bunch of things. So I've got Heaven's Harvest, who I get a lot of my survival supplies from. They've got these seed buckets, so you can get one of these seed buckets. This little bucket right here, like honestly, could feed a village. The amount of seeds that are in here could feed a small village, and these have a very long shelf life. But that's only one part of it, is the ability to grow food. Now you can also get like freeze-dried food supplies, like this is Heaven's Harvest. This is butter, right? This, for instance, right here, this is 204 servings of butter. It's freeze-dried. It's in powdered form. You reconstitute it with water. This has up to a 10-year shelf life, and that's just what they list. It probably has closer to a 20-year shelf life. So these are number 10 cans. This is what will save you. Okay. On top of that, you have the good old MREs. Okay, so if you've been in the military, you know all about MREs, meals ready to eat. These are really good. They have heating things within them. So if you've got, say 2 weeks worth of these for every member in your family, that's a good place to be, right? And don't think you have to go out and spend all your money and get a year's worth of food. Even if your goal is just to have 1 month worth of storable food, like 1 month of food, you're already really, really well off. And that will most likely last through most disasters. Most disasters are not prolonged. Maybe it's going to be 2 weeks. Maybe it's going to be 4 weeks. So if you can just aim to get at least a month worth of storable food, you're in a great place. So you've got MREs. These are good. The unfortunate thing is they taste kind of like junk, and the ingredients are terrible in these. But again, it's calories. Again, I mentioned Heaven's Harvest. Do your own research. You can buy, there's all kinds of different survival food store places you can get food at. I like Heaven's Harvest because I know the owner. He's an amazing Christian patriot, but their food is really, really high quality. And so they've got on their website, heavensharvest.com. Again, doesn't matter whether you use Heaven's Harvest or any other website. This is the one that through my own research, I've decided to go with Heaven's Harvest because I like their quality. You can get these survival food kits. You can get so if you go up to food, so they have also their own self-heating kits. I've also got a bunch of these. So these are kind of like, they're basically the same thing as an MRE. Like you open it up, it has your heat pack, it has your different instructions for making it. They're way higher quality than the MREs are. So in terms of just the actual quality of food that you're feeding your family. So they've got these MRE packs. They've got big food buckets. You can get organic food buckets. So if you want to get an organic food kit, which, we try to make everything organic if we can. They accept gold and silver. So that's really awesome. Like I love that about this company. They're true patriots. They will accept gold and silver. They've got seed kits like the one I showed you. So you can come on here and you can get individual seeds, or you can get the actual seed kits. So they have the heirloom seed kits right here. So you can get, that's the bucket I showed you, I think is just this, the seed share kit, which is one you can pass out to your neighbors. But you can get like this, for instance, it's $139. You can get a massive seed kit right here. So these are all the seeds in here. Heirloom. So that means heirloom means that you can actually harvest the seeds and reuse them next year. If you're buying seeds, only buy heirloom, right? If you're buying seeds that aren't heirloom, what it means is that you can't use your seeds year after year. That's how this seed kit, as an heirloom seed kit, after a couple of years, you're multiplying. Every seed that you plant that grows into a plant produces all the fruit that has even more seeds. If you know how to harvest those seeds, you can literally feed an entire village off of these seeds. So you have the seed kits. You do get a promo code. I think it's if you use promo code Seth, S-E-T-H, on Heaven's Harvest, you get 15% off. So again, 15% off your entire order if you use promo code Seth, S-E-T-H. They've also got here for water. They have water purification tools. You have these ultra press bottles. These are fantastic. It's kind of like a French press. You can pour muddy water into there. You can actually filter it and drink it. They're reusable. They go for a lot. So they've got some water filtration solutions. They've got the portable water filters here that you can use. Make sure you have ways of purifying your water. These are some great options here. You can also get the Life Straw. Life Straws are really good as well. And Heaven's Harvest, they also have these water bricks. So these water bricks are really, really good for storing water. They stack. They're easy to carry. You can get different size. You can get a pack of, say, 16 water bricks, a pack of 4 water bricks. They store really well. So again, now, if you are storing water, make sure that you are looking, actually right here, for instance, they say preparing containers. So you want to sanitize them, but also, and do your own research on this. When you fill up your water, you want to treat it with something. Okay, so right here it says, if the water you're using comes from a well or a water source that isn't treated with chlorine, add 2 drops of non-scented liquid household chlorine bleach to each gallon of water. Okay, that just makes sure that when in 6 months, when you go to access your water, it's not full of algae or any stuff like that in there. So a little bit of bleach in there will make sure that your water is secure. Another thing to think about, so we got food and water. Medicine is a whole thing. We're not going to be getting into that. Again, this isn't an entire episode on preparation. It's kind of looking at some of the basics. One of the big things, if the lights go out, what do? This right here is my number one recommendation for you, okay? Get yourself a couple of oil lamps. You can find them on Amazon. You can find them anywhere. This company called Dietz, D-I-E-T-Z, right? You can find these. It's an old school company. They've been making these for a very long time. I forget, whatever. But anyway, these are a really, really efficient way of providing light to your home. You can then get these. And if you then go buy right here, I'll show you. I just do a search for what we have. I think we've probably got maybe 15 gallons or 20 gallons of this paraffin wax. So you get your paraffin wax, you pour it in here. This becomes your light source. This is a great light source. So obviously, if you've got battery powered lanterns like this guy right here, these are good. So make sure you have not just flashlights, but you want to have other ways of providing light inside your home. Lanterns are great. The problem with this is just like a simple Rayovac lantern. The problem is that it runs off of batteries. So if you don't have a solar setup and if you don't have battery chargers or rechargeable batteries, then you're burning through a limited supply of energy if you're using battery powered flashlights and lamps. So I've got a bunch of rechargeable batteries. I've got multiple solar generators. So that's how I've been able to make sure that, I can have somewhat of an unlimited supply of batteries because I can recharge the batteries as I use them. Of course, they go bad after a while, but we probably have years worth of rechargeable batteries based upon before these batteries end up dying. So, and then anyway, again, like I mentioned, the oil lamps, these are great. These are old school. They are no tech. An EMP will not mess with one of these things. It will work no matter what. If you have your oil, your paraffin wax oil, and as long as you have a lighter or match or whatever to make sure you get that lit up. So, those are the big things. I tried to be quick. There's a lot to cover with this, so I try to be really efficient, but just make sure you're taking this stuff seriously. Also, we are very close to launching the ARC community. I'll just give you a quick, let me pull that up real quick. So if you go to buildthearc.com, we're launching this very, very soon. We're going through some very, very kind of last minute things to fix it, which I won't get into that. We're actually I won't get into that. But anyway, so the ARC community, which is launching very soon, is going to be a private online community full of resources, training modules, courses, business directory, gear guides, ebook library, a huge community of people willing to help each other, local chapters, so much more. If you want to learn more about the ARC community, which I'll be covering more in the coming week or so, and going into much more detail about it, go to buildthearc.com. So you go here to join, add yourself to the waiting list, and we will notify you as soon as this opens up for you. So as soon as we open the doors, you'll get a notification about that. So that is the ARC. So it's buildthearc.com. So again, the websites I talked about today, buildthearc.com, the readyscore.com, Heaven's Harvest. I'll make sure all those links are in the description. And now we are going to transition to the second half of today's show, which is an interview with me on Mike Adams' show. Mike Adams, if you know him, he's kind of like the ultimate prepper. This guy's been doing it seriously. He's very intelligent about these things. So this is going to be a show where he's actually interviewing me, talking about preparedness, community building, and our own journey of preparedness. So hope you enjoy that as much as you can. It's kind of frightening stuff, but again, stay level-headed, stay calm. I find the more prepared I am, the more serious I am about my own preparedness, the easier it is for me to stay calm and level-headed. And that's really important, actually, because when you've done what you can do, and you've taken these things seriously, you have a very centered place to approach things from, which I highly recommend it, right? We cannot let ourselves be taken over by fear with this. If you look at how the COVID campaign worked, fear was the number one tool they used to control the global population. It was fear. So do our best, not fall into fear, lean into our faith, lean into our relationship with God, and He's got this. So, all right, let's jump into the interview now with Mike Adams. One of the ways of preparing is not just preparing yourself, but helping those around you be more prepared. Because then if there is an issue, if there's a massive supply chain, and look what happened in Cuba. If you look at how these things play out, if that were to happen here on American soil, I do think that most Americans are woefully unprepared for that. Any father, if any father is seeing their own child starving, they will do whatever it takes to get that child a meal, even if it means taking someone's life. If you want to understand just how close we are to absolute Mad Max chaos, go read what happens when an EMP goes off.
Welcome to today's interview here on brightvideos.com. I'm Mike Adams, and we are joined by Seth Holhouse. And he, of course, hosts his own show, Man in America, and he's got a wealth of information about preparedness and resiliency in this time of extreme challenges. So welcome to the show, Seth. It's great to have you back on.
Mike, it's always good to come on. Thank you for having me. And you mentioned I have a wealth of resiliency. I feel like that my wealth is coming from a lot of your wealth. It's kind of like what my dad always said, playing cards. He'd say, Seth, remember, I taught you everything I know, I taught you everything you know, but not everything I know. So anyway, he had all these one-liners. So
that's
anyway,
great.
It's good to be here, Mike.
Well, I know that, it's great to have you on, by the way, and I love your work. And you have, over the years, because we've talked, we've been in touch, you have built out a really self-reliant lifestyle, you and your family. And, you moved at least once that I know of. That was a big deal. But give our audience just a little bit of background about what you are doing, because you're not just a talking head that has theories about things. Like, you're living this every single day. So tell our audience about what you're living.
Yeah, well, first off, to address the moving, I think that my wife and I have moved, I think maybe 5 times since 2020.
Oh my, that's okay. That's crazy.
Yeah, twice across the nation, or kind of serious moves. So yeah, we've done a lot of moving, and yeah, just to give I guess a little bit of background. I guess you're looking for more of a kind of preparedness perspective. I grew up in rural Ohio. I moved to New York City in 2008 to work for the Epoch Times. Actually, at that point, it was a very kind of early, I guess you could say, startup phase. But I really believed in the mission. A very strong stance against communism, which really really kind of struck a chord with me. And was in New York City up until 2020. But as we approached probably 2015 and on, I started feeling just more aware of preparedness. And so at that point, I was living on like the 42nd floor of a high rise. Wow. And so, so I kind of had my big bug out bag, and of course I couldn't have any guns or anything like that, but I was doing everything I could to prepare. And then once COVID hit, it was actually kind of before, it was early 2020. We noticed that there were these Chinese, this is before the COVID pandemic had hit, Chinese that were wearing masks and kind of distancing themselves from elevators and everything in the elevator. And so, and we found out simultaneously my wife was pregnant. So we said, okay, let's go back to the countryside of Ohio. And so we moved back to Ohio. We kind of bounced around. We ended up buying a home out in the country. We had 5 acres out, much more in a rural area. And just, this was probably 2021, 2022. We were listening to you a lot then. And it's kind of funny because my wife would come to me, in the morning, and she'd say, Seth, I spent like $2,000 on survival supplies last night. And I'd say, were you listening to Mike Adams? And she'd say, yeah. But it was good though, because we're still using the toilet paper that we bought from Costco during COVID.
Oh my.
So like I've had to buy toilet paper in probably 4 years. That just, and we probably bought it. We're hedging inflation, right?
And ammo, and I would imagine iodine, all the things that a prepper needs, right?
Absolutely. Water treatment. Won't get into the details of the ammunition, but enough to fend off a small zombie apocalypse, I guess you could say. But it wasn't just about buying the supplies. It was about learning. It was about doing. So
Yes.
we built huge gardens. Actually, because of you, I was able to convince my wife to let me get a diesel tractor. So we got a little Kubota with a
Awesome.
PTO generator, and that became a good tool for us. But we did it. I built a chicken coop. We had about 50 chickens at that time, and we had all of this stuff. We were very, from a supply perspective, we were set. But one thing that we realized in that process is, we had friends and family that were kind of near us, so we were pretty far out. And, we were telling people, hey, come out with us, hey, come help us with our gardens, come help us with the chickens, or, hey, a friend or a neighbor, if you do rabbits, we'll do chickens and we can exchange. Nobody was interested in it.
Oh, wow.
Nobody was that, they thought we were a little bit kind of out there. And, even amidst COVID, they just was like, oh, yeah, they're like the preppers. And
So you found out that you were surrounded by people who were not prepared.
absolutely.
Huh.
And looked at preparedness more of just as a hobby. And they looked at it as like, oh, okay, well, we'll have a little garden patch and we can have a garden. But I mean, we were serious, and we had, just to give an idea, and obviously gardening pretty well. I mean, when it was harvest time, just between say tomatoes and bell peppers, I probably collected 10 5-gallon buckets of vegetables. So it wasn't just a small little garden; it was serious. And we still do. We had a Harvest Right freeze dryer, so we were freeze drying eggs, freeze drying vegetables, freeze drying ground beef. We were just, everything was oriented around this, but we were learning in the process. That was one of my favorite lessons, which I look at it every day when I look at my mangled toe, is don't build a chicken coop in the rain wearing Birkenstocks. Because I dropped a 4x8 sheet of 3/4 inch plywood vertically down across all my toes, and destroyed my toenail and broke a couple of toes.
Oh gosh.
So, but that. That's how you learn your lessons. Also, I knocked a tooth out. This is a fake tooth. I learned the lesson also working on the chicken coop of why not to leave your power drill on top of your 8-foot ladder when you go somewhere to do something, because when you look up and you're moving the ladder and the drill comes down and knocks your tooth out, and your job is to be on camera, that doesn't work out very well. So we learned a lot of lessons, and that was really valuable. I think a lot of people, they look at preparedness as collecting things. It's easy to get kind of geeked out and like, oh, I got this cool survival knife and this, but it's actually the skills that are really important. But more than that, we realized that the most important thing that I think that we didn't have, which was a community. And that was it, because we were very isolated. And I think, even worse than being isolated, we were surrounded by people that knew we were very prepared, but they weren't prepared. And so that's not a very good situation to be in. And so as crazy as it is, after about 2 years and sinking, a significant amount of money into our property, digging a well, putting in a wood burning stove, all these different things, we decided to move back to New York. But we went to upstate New York because both my wife and I spent most of our adult lives living in the New York region. And so we had a huge community of people here that we knew. And as much as I hate being in New York, the reality is, we've got 2 little girls, are 2 and 5. We've now got a homeschool group with over 30 kids. We've got people over every day. We've got this an incredible community of people. whether it's the local raw milk farm that we know the owners, we know the local farmers that run the farm stands. And that was, I think, one of the biggest lessons of that whole process was that you have to have people, you have to have community that unless you're a, SEER trained, you can survive anywhere kind of person, you're not going to do well just completely in isolation. One person, even if you've got Enoch on an off-grid laptop, you're still not going to know how to, suture up a wound as well as your neighbor who's a nurse, right? And so that was part of the process that brought us back here. And we've now, I feel like that we're more prepared than ever. And I think a lot of that is because obviously we have a lot of supplies and we've got a lot of food, actually too much food. I had to get a storage unit to move some of our food into because we had all these 5-gallon buckets of dry beans and everything.
Well, that's going to come in super handy right now with the global fertilizer cutoff.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
You're sitting on a gold mine right there.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is I think that if anything, we're hedging inflation. Like I'm eating canned foods that I bought for $1 a can 4 years ago. That's now $2.50 a can. Yeah. So true. That's one way I look at it is that, we're just working through supplies and I've got a whole box of this magical stuff right here. I've got a whole box of this in our food storage room. I've got probably another 30 of these things sitting around.
That's good.
We use a lot of your stuff, which kudos to you, Mike. Actually, you've done a great job with a lot of your products, and we use your products daily.
Oh, thank you. Well, I do too. I mean, obviously the protein in here is 4 years old because I stockpiled loads of whey protein, and just like you, I'm working through the older stuff first, and it's perfectly good.
It is. It is.
So I've got a 4-year protein supply. Which is something.
I think we've got maybe, I think I have about 400 pounds of of powdered milk, organic, freeze-dried milk that I took. We bought in these big bags from Azure. And then I bought a vacuum sealer with Mylar bags, and we actually individually sealed. I think honestly, it's probably 400 pounds of dried milk that's just sitting.
So, you had some time with the sealer there, yeah.
Oh yes, yeah, yep.
Well,
yep.
So you're very well prepared, but like you say, it's not just about the stuff; it's about the skills and it's about community. But you feel like you're well covered there in upstate New York right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the one thing is that people think, oh, you live in New York. Well, like I've lived in the heart of New York City. I mean, literally in Union Square. I lived there for almost a decade. Upstate in New York is, I'd say, feels more conservative than rural Ohio in many ways. I think maybe because you have that contrast, right? When you think that sometimes it's kind of the whole yin and the yang, right? When you have the opposing forces, that one force drives the other force even further away. So I think the people that are outside of the city, that are living in the more rural areas, living within a blue state. It's kind of like California has some of the strongest kind of red population that there is, right? Because people, they know the importance of it versus Ohio is very purple, right? Which we know that, right? Every election you see that Ohio is one of those purple states. Well, according to the rigged voting machines, it is, but that's a different issue.
Right.
But yeah, so I do because we have the supplies. I'm building a pole barn pretty soon to build out a new studio to do more kind of survival content, more building that kind of stuff. But we have all the supplies and everything. But we've got the community. We've got my next door neighbor is a retired nurse. The neighbor across from her, he runs, or part of his kind of side business, he has probably 2 acres worth of log, for firewood. So that's what he does as part of his extra income. He's got all that. Not to mention, like I said, we know all the farmers. We know the milk farm, the local milk farm. We get our raw milk, which is great because New York happens to be a state where you can get raw milk directly from the farm. Ohio, you had to do like a milk share, a herd share type thing. So yeah, we now have a lot of the people and the infrastructure. And that's, I think, is what I found to be one of the most important things about this is actually just building your community. Not to mention, I think that people oftentimes overlook the importance of your mental health. And when you're sitting alone in isolation, and it's funny because I was talking to my wife this morning about this process, and she was, Seth, she's like, I remember there was one conversation that really was one of those conversations that shifted her thinking, like, okay, we need to change. And it was when I was sitting on the back deck with her, talking about like where I could set up sniper positions to take out people that were coming to our house if they were coming to steal from us. And that was for her, that was for like, okay, we've gone too far down this hole, right? And of course, it's not a bad thing to think through those scenarios. I know that I've listened to your discussions on that and how you've, got markers. Okay, that's my 500-yard marker. There's my 1,000-yard marker. But, I think that the mental aspect of it, it doesn't matter what kind of studies you look at. I'm not sure if you've interviewed Michael Nels before, talk about I forget what he called his book about just the brain and how important it is for us to have these healthy relationships to help build that mental resilience. It makes us less susceptible to propaganda, less susceptible to fear, everything. And so now we're at a place where we've got a community, and it's actually part of what we've got a lot of projects. We have the podcast, but one of the things that actually we're launching next Tuesday is something called the ARC community. And so it's buildthearc.com is the website for it. And right now it's just to sign up for like the waiting list. We've had, I think now in a couple of months, we've got over 11,000 people just on the waiting list just to come in to join this ARC community. And what it is it's a private community for, like, you could say it's kind of faith-based preparedness, but it's really for people just to kind of build this community. We're going to set up local chapters. So we're going to have local chapters across the nation and also as different countries kind of join in. But the whole purpose of it was to basically solve the problem that we had in Ohio, which is, what do you do if you live in an area and aside from your kind of crazy uncle that's prepared, no one else actually thinks like you do? How do you find that community? How do you build that local infrastructure? And so that's part of what we're doing with the ARC community, is giving people the ability to actually look and find people like, oh, wow, this person's 20 miles from me. Okay, great. You can join local chapters. So that's another thing that we're doing. We're launching next Tuesday. And so as of right now, buildthearc.com is just a landing page where you put your name and your email to be notified once the doors open. So that's another thing that we're doing as part of all this. Okay, let me give out your main website too. It's sethwholehouse.com. And I'm sure you have a link to your ARC project there as well. If you scroll down, there's actually perfect. There's the four main things that we're working on. We've got the Man in America podcast, which is maninamerica.com, the ARC community, which is buildthearc.com, Prep Like Noah, which is my book that's coming out in mid-May. And then we have also this site we built called Ready Score. And so actually, you mind if I talk about Ready Score real quick? That's another thing that we're trying to do. We've been working on. Let's segue to that, but I have a question for you first. Yes, please. Okay, so one of the things, like your presentation style is very kind. It's very compassionate and friendly, and I love that about you. By the way, you're not intimidating to people. At the same time, this is what I want you to answer. I believe that America is facing a level of difficulty because of this war, and the collapse of global supply chains and fertilizer and all kinds of scarcities. I think that the average American clearly is not ready for any of this, but I even think that many so-called community preparedness Americans aren't ready for what's coming. And my question to you is, what do you think about because at some day you're going to have to get really tough about the reality of the situation if this war continues and the supply chains are shut down, and we could lose the ability to manufacture car tires, because of the lack of sulfur, and you can't vulcanize tires without. I mean, we could lose transportation infrastructure in this country. At that point, things are going to get really dicey, and it's going to move beyond like a feel-good goat milk rally. You know what I mean? What are your thoughts on that? Well, a lot of thoughts. One thing is that the community, the people that we're close to, I'm trying to do everything I can to help them all be prepared ahead of time. One thing, for instance, I had an opportunity, one of my friends he owns a survival food company, and I had an opportunity to get a whole pallet of freeze-dried number 10 cans at like a very, very heavy discount. Oh, that's awesome. So it shows about a 600-pound pallet of freeze-dried food that I paid for just a lot of food, just the shipping, right? he has a lot of food. So we sent a message out to all of our local families we know and said, hey, come grab a box of this stuff. We passed it out. And so that's one of the best things, because that's, I think, one of the ways of preparing is not just preparing yourself, but helping those around you be more prepared. Because then if there is an issue, if there's a massive supply chain, whether it's, and look what happened in Cuba, right?
Yeah.
I suspect that we hit them with an EMP, and maybe we hit them with an HARP earthquake, and now we're going to go in, right? So if you look at how these things play out, if that were to happen here on American soil, I do think that most Americans are woefully unprepared for that. And obviously, you don't want to be the person that disaster strikes and you've got 40 people showing up in your driveway looking for handouts, right? So my thinking is, okay, let me get them seeds, let me get them as much food as ahead of time as we can. But I do think that, as nice of a guy as I am, and it's not like an act. I mean, I think that it's who I've always really been. It's just kind of like this kind of person I am. I think part of it is because I was really fat as a kid. Kind of side story, I was really overweight. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll just be really nice to everybody. That's how I'm going to become successful, because I can't rely on my good looks to do anything because I was fat, right? So just, when you're a young kid, you find these kind of coping mechanisms. And so that laid a foundation, but I'm also a father. I've got a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old. And that's the reality of it, is that any father, if any father is seeing their own child starving, they will do whatever it takes to get that child a meal, even if it means taking someone's life. And I'm not saying that I would jump to do that, and hopefully I would never have to, but there's also a very sober reality of that. I mean, I would say one of the biggest things that it's like, if every American could right now go read 1 second after and read what happens in a country after an EMP hits, like, that's, to me, not to be like a fear monger, but it's like, if you want to understand just how close we are to absolute Mad Max chaos, go read what happens when an EMP goes off, and read what happens 30 days into that, let alone 6 months into that, where you've got, complete chaos, which I know you've talked extensively about. So I think part of it is being mentally prepared. I hope that our nation never gets to a place where we have that situation where we're literally getting into small localized wars and battles and gunfights. I hope that never comes to that. But as nice as I am as a father, I understand that there are certain times, it's like, if you go to war, if there's an enemy nation that's invading, or if you're occupied by an enemy nation, right, then you have to do things that require, I think, discipline and making sure your family survives. And I don't think a lot of Americans are have even gone through the mental exercise of thinking, what does that look like? Yeah,
clearly that's the case. We've never really had war domestically since the Civil War, right? World War II didn't touch our shores. It was those people dying over there. It was easy for people to say that. Vietnam, et cetera. Even this war, it's those people over there. Except what's different now is that the closure of the Strait of Hormuz will have devastating global economic repercussions, including the loss of urea, fertilizer, phosphate fertilizers, because of the loss of sulfuric acid that's necessary for their production. We're looking at crop yields strongly declining over the next year. And also, don't forget that some of the social tinderbox was put in place by Trump having ICE agents aggressively in the streets in Minnesota, shooting and killing Americans while wearing masks and having zero accountability. People on the left have not forgotten that. And they shouldn't, because that was blatantly unconstitutional. And let me ask you this. There's a risk scenario here where Trump escalates this war to World War III, and then he pulls a Zelensky and he cancels the elections, the midterms, and he cancels the First Amendment somehow, which is what Zelensky did, and then just starts shutting down or arresting independent media. It could be people like you and I. In that scenario, there could be a lot of domestic uprisings, especially among some Democrats who have been Trump haters for a long time. If Trump cancels elections, it's like, I feel like all bets are off and we could end up in a civil war, or at least regionally. What are your thoughts on that possible scenario?
I mean, I think that if you're looking at this with a rational analytical mind, you can see that these scenarios are very, I'm not gonna say that they're necessarily likely, but they're definitely, they're possible. They're absolutely possible. I hope and I pray that they don't come about, but these are real things. The tension in our nation is, I'm 40 this year. So I'm not looking back on, 75 years of living and like, oh, I remember when that happened. But, I've lived enough to, have a sense of what this nation feels like. And I think that the tension in our nation is now higher than it has ever been. I feel like that even a couple of years ago, that the nation was divided, but it was divided into a couple bigger groups, right? You had the, people that believe that the election was stolen. You had people, okay, that was a big group. Okay, hey, we need election justice. We need to have audits. We need to have justice. You had the people that said, okay, hey, that's a lie. The election wasn't stolen. Okay, but still though, maybe America was divided into a couple large groups. As of right now, and I think it's absolutely by design, I feel like that our country has been splintered into dozens of different groups where even looking within the kind of so-called MAGA or so-called right, it is so splintered now that to me is concerning. I remember, there's a little while ago when I was talking to, I interviewed Michael Yon, who I know that you've interviewed many times. Actually, funny enough, he woke me up at like 3 a.m. last night, called me from Japan. So I didn't answer. I was like, why is my phone ringing? Look, it was Michael Yon saying, hello from Japan.
Yeah, that sounds like Michael. Yeah,
absolutely.
I just talked to him yesterday. He's in Japan.
But one thing that he said really stuck with me is I was asking, okay, what do you think is going to happen? Or, when do you think it's going to happen? He said, look, he said, don't pay attention to the one spark that causes the forest fire. He's like, pay attention to conditions.
Yes.
He says, there's 30 different conditions. Any one of these conditions could lead to the same spark that then starts a forest fire. And that's where I feel like that we're at right now. I don't know what it's going to be. I think that we're in a place now where, our own government, which actually it's no different than it has been since almost the beginning of this country, but false flags on our own soil are very, very real. It's very possible. So could there be some sort of false flag terror attack that gets blamed on Iran as a way of justifying the war? Absolutely. Could there be a legitimate terror attack? Could there be a series of cells of Chinese and maybe either Iranian or who knows that actually do have a legitimate terrorist attack in this nation? Absolutely. So and we're at a place where all these conditions are there. And so that's what makes me feel really nervous, not to mention looking at what's happening with AI, looking at what's happening with Palantir. On one of my live shows just over the weekend, there was a 2-minute clip of, I think it was the DoD's head of their AI program that was outlining exactly how the Palantir kill chain works. And, some of the points I was making in that show and talking about this is that we're looking at this and he's showing us literally the Palantir kill chain, identifying targets, tracking insane levels of detail. Not to mention, it's like, do you really think that the DoD is going to show us like the kind of the full capacity of their technology? No, there's no way, right? But even looking at like that, one thing that I've always been concerned of, because I'm a student of history, is whenever the leadership of a nation has the ability to exert insane amounts of control over its people, it oftentimes happens. And even if someone's watching, and even if someone is, say, an ardent Trump fan, and they're saying, look, I support Trump 100%, I'll say, okay, fine. But what happens if the next person gets in? What happens if the next person gets in? He has the same keys to that Palantir kill chain. What happens if that gets turned against the American people? And that's something that is frightening, because if you look at a lot of the warfare footage coming out of Ukraine, it's not the same war that was being fought 30, 40 years ago. This is warfare that even a skilled operator here in America would have a hard time countering. I mean, how many people have... Go ahead, yeah.
Not only that, but remember during the ICE raids in Minnesota, you had top Trump officials labeling the Americans who were killed as domestic terrorists, and claiming after they shot that guy, I forgot his name, but after they shot the guy, they claimed that, well, he had a gun and he intended to come in and have a massacre and kill everybody. They just made that up. But they declare you a domestic terrorist, which means that they, in their minds, they don't have to abide by any rule of law whatsoever. And the Trump administration is now becoming famous for abandoning any law. They just do whatever the hell they want, internationally or domestically. So I wouldn't even put it past Trump to use AI Palantir targeting, with suicide drones or whatever, taking out Americans in our own cities. That's well within the possibility of the mindset of this administration now, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah. Unfortunately, it is. If you look at what's been done, right? You look at, I'm sure you probably saw Joe Kent's resignation.
Yes.
I mean, that's
got it right here, actually.
Yeah.
There it is, yeah.
I was literally, as I read that to my wife probably an hour ago, and I fought back tears reading about him talking about his wife and losing his wife.
Yeah.
And, these are very real scenarios. But one thing that also concerns me is you could say that I'm fighting in a war of my own, as you are too, which is an information war. And, thankfully there have been some opportunities for us to have free speech. Obviously you're building an infrastructure that I think has a very strong capability in terms of surviving attacks on free speech, right?
Yes.
You're not hoping that Elon Musk isn't going to censor you. You're anticipating that he will. And actually, I mean, I just saw this too. I put out an Epstein video. I sent it to you before the show. You probably had time to watch it, but I put out a 3.5 minute Epstein video, and that video was so censored on Twitter. It's incredible. I mean, I had people like John Rich sharing it multiple times, General Flynn sharing it, Kim.com sharing it, people with, collectively probably 10 million followers sharing this video. The video's got 300,000 views. Right?
Yeah,
so
I tried to view the video.
Yeah.
It wouldn't let me bring it up until I logged into X. So it got marked as sensitive content.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I had to send it to you a couple times because on the messaging app that you and I were using, the first time I sent it to you, it refused to send it to you.
Oh, wow.
It actually wouldn't even send the Twitter link to you.
Wow.
So
yeah, I tried to open it before the show here. Wouldn't let me open it. So I'll have to check it out when I get back to my desktop.
Yeah. But what really concerns me is that what you see happening with the recent announcement from, I think it was Brendan Carr, if I remember correctly his name, he was the head of the FCC, talking about these media companies and broadcast networks that are sharing AI footage of the war, saying that they're going to strip the broadcast licenses of these broadcasting agencies, whether it's ABC or CNN or Fox, or it doesn't really matter, right? If they're sharing what they say is fake news, so they're saying it's AI, but this is really frightening because who becomes the arbiter of truth?
Yeah, right.
How do you know what's AI and what's not, right?
Any video the White House doesn't like, they immediately label it AI. And also all U.S. warplanes that fall out of the sky are only from friendly fire.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
and all videos of Bibi Netanyahu are not AI.
Right. Right. I mean, just clearly, we're just being subjected to psychological operations daily. But you're right. You bring up a good point. Who's the arbiter of what is truth? And the AI videos, as you know, I've created an AI avatar, Mr. Fu Koff.
I watched it. Yeah, the other day I watched that one.
Yeah. But of course, it's obvious that that's a caricature. Like that's a fictional character on purpose. But it shows you how convincing AI videos can be. And by the way, I rendered that video locally, not on some online service. That was all created with my own hardware, which means even if I'm censored, I can create those kinds of videos with my own workstations. So now I'm using it in good faith, for comedy purposes or educational, but other people will use it in bad faith. And I wouldn't be surprised if the White House will have like a fake AI content generation division to put out fake stuff and call it real. I wouldn't be surprised.
Exactly. And again, who becomes the arbiter of truth? And it's a serious question because it used to be that if you saw it, you could believe it, right? You see it, you believe it, but that's no longer the case anymore.
Right.
And there's part of me that thinks as I take a step back and I look at everything that's happening, right? Looking at Iran, like Iran, as much as you might think, oh, okay, well, this is Iran is this independent nation that is against this globalist or against this, this Rockefeller, Rothschild banking system, et cetera. Iran was just as kind of neck deep in the COVID and the vaccine operations and the lockdown. So they were just as much on board with the globalist stuff as Israel and as America. And so there's also part of me that's wondering, are the controllers up above all of this? Because I think that to look at, say, Israel as an example and think, oh, it's Israel that's doing these things. I think Israel is a proxy of just other private, powerful, hidden, probably satanic groups, just like our own military industrial complex is the army, just like the city of London is the banking arm. So that's one of the other things that really kind of concerns me with all this is that is this war, is the shutting down of the Strait of Hormuz, is all of this part of an acceleration towards their Agenda 2030?
Absolutely.
Because it's brilliant.
Is.
If that's their plan, it's absolutely brilliant.
Well, think about it. During COVID, Trump oversaw the approval and military distribution of biological weapons to be injected into the American people that killed over 1.5 million Americans by good estimates. But that didn't kill enough for the globalists, right? Because they really want to eliminate maybe billions of people. So now here's another way to do it. Trick Trump into waging war, shut down the Strait of Hormuz, cut off the energy supply of Western civilization, the natural gas, the oil, the helium, the sulfur, the sulfuric acid, the fertilizer, and just let billions starve or let the uprising begin. I mean, I think you're right, Seth. This is a top level anti-human situation that has been put into place. It's been engineered.
And I think that one thing that I try to do with all of this is I try to not focus too hard on the isolated incidents. I try to look at patterns because it's really easy to lie about a single event or a couple of events. It's much more difficult to lie with patterns across history, right? Or patterns occurring. And so that's why I'm always trying to kind of keep an eye on, okay, what are the patterns that I'm seeing? And, one thing is, I'm sure you recall there's one of the videos of Klaus Schwab talking about the threat of a cyber attack that shuts down everything. I remember him saying how it would make the kind of the COVID pandemic look like kind of nothing compared to what that could cause. But then you now see they're warning about the Iranians targeting the banking system. So how easy would it be? And it doesn't matter whether Iran does it, whether the CIA does it, whether Mossad does it, whether the CCP does it. It actually doesn't matter because any one of those nations can be used as a tool to collapse a banking system. Like what happens if there is that? We know that the dollar is dying. We know that there is a massive war built on the back of the petrodollar. We know, though, that they knew that was going to happen. It's a fiat currency. It has a life cycle that's never changed throughout history. Fiat currencies, they come and they go, right? Different than, this 10-ounce bar of silver right here. This will never be digital. It'll never be controlled. I can go bury it in my backyard. Nobody will ever find it, right? I like that about silver. But how easy is it for them to say, okay, you know what? I think it's time for us to roll out that CBDC. Let's go ahead and do one of these nationwide banking system hacks on the American banking system. That's going to trigger a global stock market wipeout. That's going to trigger the global financial reset. We're going to then bring in the central bank digital currency.
Yep.
All of these things are possible. And the thing is when you have the theater of war, it's a theater of war, right? They have the script. They can have whatever character they want to walk in on stage and assassinate the other character if they need it to happen. And they can then use that to bring us closer to their end goal. And I think that by now, whether you've been studying these things for a very long time, like I have, or even much longer for yourself, or whether you're just coming into it because you found the recent Epstein files and you're like, oh my gosh, all those QAnon people were right. They are eating babies. They are trafficking and torturing children. This stuff's all real. What you realize is that at the top of this system, there is a very small group of very evil people that I believe are probably not even fully human or even human at all, that have an immense amount of control they've amassed over millennia, that they want to be able to have immortality through technology, through transhumanism. Go listen to Jared Kushner talking about his generation being the last ones to ever die. And if that's the case, if they're able to achieve immortality, well, if some of our population has immortality and others don't, then those others that don't have immortality are just going to be these useless eaters consuming the earth's resources. So those people definitely need to be kind of called, right? And so that's the thing that I'm trying to look at with all of this is I'm trying not to get too caught up in the fighting between Laura Loomer and Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens and this other person. Of course, I'm following and I've got my own opinions on those things, but I think that the bigger thing is that this is all scripted. And I think that a lot of these things are not necessarily by the people involved in these kind of scandals themselves, but I think from the higher level, a lot of these are intentional scandals and distractions to keep people focused on this over here so they don't see that coming from behind them, when they don't see it, is this global technocratic system that's going to come in and strip away everyone's freedoms. And the people that are fighting, the people that are the useful idiots that are fighting for, whether they're fighting for the Zionists, whether they're fighting for the communists, it doesn't matter because oftentimes they're the first ones to get the gun to the back of their head up against a wall, right? And that's what we don't realize is that fundamentally this is a war against humanity. And I really try to pull myself into that place from looking at what's happening and remind myself of that even though, say, you have a neighbor that has the different political sign than you, that person is just as much a target for elimination as my own family. And so am I going to try to focus my energy on fighting the person that has a different political viewpoint than me? Or am I going to try to help that person and those around me see that, this is humanity versus a small group of elite satanic pedophiles that want to kill us all? Because I think that's the only hope that I have is us as a human race realizing that and doing something about it.
So Seth, what you just outlined there, which was really brilliantly stated, that segment was just a great summary of where we are. And I imagine that if you could visit yourself 10 years ago and hear what you just said, you wouldn't have believed it, right? And even I wouldn't have believed it because we've all learned, usually through hard lessons along the way, of where we are. But here's the thing. So you just laid it out brilliantly. And I think our audience obviously is completely up to speed on those things you just said. The typical person, the typical American, is nowhere near that level of understanding. And I would imagine even some in your preparedness community, even though they may totally agree with, the importance of let's be ready, for a 3-day hurricane or a superstorm in New York or whatever. I would imagine there are some people even in your own group that don't yet have enough knowledge and experience to walk through all of the things that you just laid out. And so there's this gap between where people function and the way the world actually works. Because I believe that what you just described is accurate about the way the world actually works. And as long as your internal map, for those people who aren't up to speed, if their internal map is lacking the detail of what's actually driving things, they will never be able to get to their destination because their map is incomplete. You see what I mean? So how
exactly?
Yeah, go ahead. Your comments.
Oh no, I agree completely. Or it's like if you go back into, say, Tony Robbins, right? Looking at, or even NLP or psychocybernetics, and looking at your beliefs shape your reality. Your beliefs even shape you on a genetic level. Your thinking in your mind can literally change your own DNA, and this is known, right? And so, let alone your beliefs about, I read the Scofield Bible, so this is the role of Israel, right? Like, there's propaganda campaigns that could have been inserted into the consciousness of humanity 500 years ago.
Oh yeah.
Right. So we're still arguing about whether the election was stolen in 2020. We're not even touching upon whether there were advanced civilizations, whether Tartaria was real, whether there were giants walking among us, whether they're right. Humanity has been pushed so far into a cage. But, I think that part of it, and this is what I'm trying to do with the access that I have to reach people, because the podcast has grown, we've grown really, really well. Actually, I think it was in February, between the video content and articles, I think we probably hit 15 million impressions, right? With Man in America. Yeah. So we're really growing. And so what I'm trying to do with this is I'm trying to really pivot and not come at this from a left-right perspective, not come at this from a divisive place, but trying to help kind of walk people through that narrative I just gave you. And part of what I'm doing with that. And part of what really shaped that for me is I interviewed a woman maybe about, I think it was about 3 weeks ago. I think I published an interview. Her name is Max Lowen. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but she was she was an SRA victim. She was trafficked under the underground tunnels in the Vatican. She was trafficked by the Jesuits. She was in most dangerous game hunting parties. And so I think that people like that, like I'm trying my best to try to help bring their voices forward, because we're going to have a hard time finding someone that's at the top of that system that's going to come out and become a whistleblower of the system.
Yeah, no.
Right? Like, look what happened. The guy, I forget his name, he was the German banker that talked about what he saw at some of these parties, and he realized they were eating. I'm pretty sure that guy was killed. I think he was living in Florida at the time. I think that he was killed. But there are people that have seen the inside of this system that they can tell us a lot. I think we should be listening. I've got another interview coming out this Saturday. It's a two-part interview because it's so heavy. It's a 2-hour-long interview. I split it into 2 parts with a guy named J.R. Sweet. And I'm not sure, have you ever come across J.R. Sweet before,
No,
Mike?
Not familiar.
So he has a website which is called MormonMonarch.com. And J.R. was, from a very young age, he was born into a royal bloodline that traced back to a certain king over in Europe. And from a very, very young age, he was subjected to satanic ritual abuse. A lot of it he experienced underground at Disneyland. So it's like, yeah, he in the interview I had with him, I mean, it was one of the most difficult and darkest interviews I've ever done. And not to say that it was about this pure evil. There's actually a lot of hope inside of that. And you can see his struggle, but yeah, he was part of human hunting parties. He was, in my interview with him, he walks through basically how the Disneyland apparatus works and how the intelligence agencies have these underground apparatuses and bases as part of Disney, where they would stop a ride midway. His uncle, who was his handler, who was CIA, would take him off the ride, and they would go in. And he described one scene which is so shocking, where he's at Disney. His uncle takes him off one of the rides. I think he was maybe 6 or 7 years old. They go into an area underground. They've got cages full of children. And he says, yeah, I mean, I'll have to share. I'll make sure I share it with you. I mean, it was mind blowing. And
why did they stop the ride? Is that how they snatched the kids, or what are you saying?
What he was saying is that what he was describing is that, I think this is the Disneyland in maybe Anaheim is a California one, but actually that underneath of it, there's actually a massive intelligence base. So that the CIA has a base that's actually part of underground Disney. And this sounds so wild, right? It sounds like, okay, this is crazy. How could this actually be? But then when you realize that all this stuff is connected, and it's like, it actually makes sense. You look at even Disney, it's like, okay, why is Disney putting Illuminati symbolism in their shows? Why are they putting nudity, all the things that Disney's hidden in it? It's like, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
The answer is because it's a small world after all.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. So anyway, I'll finish that story. So basically, he described they go under, and they told him, they said, hey, one of these kids has been giving us a lot of trouble lately. And he thought it was maybe an older boy that was kind of really aggressive. It was a young girl. And he said, so they underground in Disney, they picked out this young girl. They took her into a room. They strapped her down in a certain kind of a theater they had set up for sacrifices. He said they had an altar. They strapped her down to the altar. They slit her throat. And he said that they had a special table where the blood would drain off into both sides, and it would run down into a white cup. And so he said it was white because the contrast of the blood against the white cup was really kind of obviously very strong. And they consumed the blood of this. And so he ended up, as he describes in his story, he ended up becoming a CIA MK Ultra sleeper assassin. And that was his job. And the crazy thing is he didn't know any of this until about 2017. All of his memories started coming back in 2017.
Well, I didn't realize this interview was going to go in this direction, by the way.
Sorry.
It's getting a little grotesque. But I understand what you're saying. And this is a man you've interviewed. What was his website?
Mormon Monarch. Mormon. Yeah. He has an entire diary on there where he walks through. He has pictures of him as a child. He has documentation. I mean, it's it's all there. And I've unfortunately gone down this rabbit hole far too much. And maybe I should have given, and maybe Mike, before you put the show up, you can give a kind of like a viewer discretion advised. But I guess the bigger point that I was making is that when you start to see this stuff, you realize that the stories that we've heard of this shadowy cabal that's sacrificing and doing evil things and casting spells. I mean, it's like if you believe in Satan, like from the perspective, if you believe that Satan exists, right? Which I do. Like I believe that Satan exists. I'm not an atheist, right? I believe there's God and everything. If you believe that Satan exists, if you believe that he has a certain amount of control over this world, then wouldn't it make sense that these kinds of evil things will be happening in the power centers of this world where, in a lot of ways, the world that Satan has been basically ruling. So then you understand it's like actually, yeah, it makes sense why there's this bioweapon jab program. It makes sense why they're mutilating children. All these things start to make sense if you can just get to that place where you realize that's the power structure that runs this world.
Well, that's true. And as far as the Disney link, I have noticed over the years that especially in Florida, seems like some large portion of people who are arrested and charged with child trafficking work for Disney. Disney World, I guess in that case, Orlando or wherever it is. But let's shift gears here because that's gross. Let's talk about your Ready score. And because none of us were ready for that segment on Disney. Let's talk about your Ready score. So as I understand it, you've got an online scoring system that people can sort of self-score their readiness.
This was part of what, again, as I mentioned, one of my goals and my missions, I think is actually what you've been doing as well, is I want to do whatever I can to help more people in America, also around the world, but just help more people be more prepared. And because if every family in America had a 30-day food supply set aside, then they couldn't create food riots after 2 days of grocery stores being shut down, right? So these are Kissinger highlighted it perfectly, talking about controlling the food, the money, the energy, et cetera. That's how you get people to bow and to bend a knee and then sign up for their vaccine passport to get their loaf of GMO cricket protein bread, right? So one of the things that really hit me, and this happened during the winter storm, the ice storm that we recently had come swept across America, that most people that die in these kinds of storms, they don't die because of the storm itself. They die because of a lack of preparedness. If you look at the Texas freeze, the people that died in the Texas freeze, they died not because of the storm, by and large. They died because they weren't prepared for it. They didn't have a backup heating source. They didn't have backup power. They were reliant on the tap water coming out. So when that ice storm shut down the grid infrastructure and they could no longer have access to water, right, that became an issue. And so part of what we wanted to do, so we launched ReadyScore.com. And what it is there's two different tests on there. There's a 90-second test and about an 8 or 9 minute test. And basically what it does is let's just say that someone came to me and said, hey, Mike, can you help me just assess where my preparation is at? You would say, okay, hey, Seth, do you have a way of filtering your own water? How much food do you have stored? Do you have water stored? Do you have a way of protecting yourself? Do you have medication, et cetera? You'd ask these questions. And that's what we do with the Ready Score, is that we ask people these different questions, including where do you live, right? If you live in a high rise in New York City, it doesn't matter how much food and water you have, you're screwed in a grid down scenario, right? And so that's what we build it out for. So people, they take the test, they get to the end of it, and it actually gives them their Ready Score. It says, okay, you are a 63 out of 100. And not just that, it says, okay, we've broken down preparedness into, I think, 11 different categories of preparedness that we've identified. And it will actually show you that, okay, in these 7 categories, you're basically a 10 out of 10. But, in this one category, you're a 3 out of 10, right? You're still relying on, you don't have any kind of backup energy, or you don't have any way of defending yourself. And so the idea with this is that kind of like you get a credit score, which I think is a complete rigged system anyway. It gives you a score where it gives you an assessment. Okay, hey, this is your Ready Score. These are where your gaps are. And it actually gives you steps. Okay, here's how you can improve. We recommend you, hey, go buy a Sawyer Life Straw. Like if you live in Florida and you're reliant on tap water and you have no way of filtering water, go spend $30 and get a Life Straw. Like that could literally be the one thing that saves your family from drinking creek water because you don't have water because the system's down, and then your 8-year-old daughter gets some sort of waterborne disease.
Or,
So
hey, you're just one
that's it.
AR-15 away from 90, from scoring 90. You know, it's like this problem is solvable. No, but I like it. So the website for that is it readyscore.com?
Yeah, just readyscore.com.
Okay, is that up now?
Yeah, it's live right now.
Okay, let me.
Yep, I think we've already had maybe close to 7,000 or 8,000 people that have taken the test so far.
Go. Okay, how ready
and
is
they've
your
gotten
family?
their assessment.
I like it. I like this. Good idea. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Next, have like a AI survival chatbot right there.
Yeah.
That would be
yeah.
even more fun. And it can condemn you for not having enough water or whatever. It's like
there you go.
like an AI chatbot that won't let you get away with anything. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us, since we're about to wrap up this interview also, tell us about at SethWholehouse.com, your main website. You mentioned your show. You've got the ARC community project. You've got Prep Like Noah. That's your book coming out also, right? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So that's coming out mid-May. We don't have the exact date yet. The idea is that we're calling it, and the website for that is just preplikenoah.com. And we're just calling it, it's the kind of the prepping guide for non-preppers. And that's the idea with it. It's really, like for yourself, you would read it, maybe you take a few things away from it. But the intention, again, is to helping someone that feels overwhelmed with preparedness. Maybe they feel like, okay, where do I start? Or maybe they're well into the journey, but they still need some helpful guides. That's the whole point of Prep Like Noah. It's kind of looking at, okay, who was the original prepper? It was Noah. I mean, he spent 100 years building an ark when everyone around him was, doing all kinds of evil things, and who knows what they were doing, right? Bestiality and mixing of human DNA. The Nephilim were probably raping people for all we know. I mean, that's the world that he lived in, but he followed his divine intuition. He followed God's word, and he built this oak. So in my opinion, it's, if you want to be prepared, let's go to the OG prepper, which was Noah. And so we're kind of looking at his story and using some of the lessons from his story to look at how we can approach that, very rationally now. But a big part of it is that kind of helping to reframe the word prepping, right? So it's not just about, collecting and like kind of having all the guns and ammo and everything, but it's also about realizing that I think that preparedness is actually just getting back to living in a traditional way, right? So our grandparents who lived through the Great Depression or whatnot, they wouldn't say they were preppers, right? That's just how they lived. And I think that's one of the things, if you look at the social engineering that's happened, that our society and everything has been designed in a way that we've been made intentionally by these controllers to be less and less resilient, less and less self-reliant. And so it's really a much more of a lifestyle shift of not prepping out of fear, but I think trying to live in a way that like we're human, actually, like live how God wanted us to live in abundance with nature, looking into permaculture, animal husbandry, community building, how to bake your own bread, all the different things. And so the Prep Like Noah, the purpose of that book is to really help kind of walk people through in a way that is easy to understand. So it's the kind of book that, say you've been trying to get your grandma or your mom to be more prepared, but she's like has a stigma towards it. Oh, you're a doomsday bunker kind of person. This is the book that's like, okay, just give this a read, right? It walks through the threats that we're currently facing as a world. It gives a lot of historical examples of times we thought that, hey, we're invincible as America. Then the Great Depression hit, or the Dust Bowl, or World War II, or whatever it is, and just kind of walks people through the importance of preparedness, but more so from the perspective like this is how we should be living. It's not just about becoming a prepper. It's about living in a way that our lifestyle inherently is baked into our lifestyle, that we're outside the system, and therefore we cannot be controlled by the system, that we're not being forced into taking the mark of the beast system, that we can actually survive outside of that. And that's one of the intentions behind that.
When I was a child visiting my grandparents in the Midwest, they always had a root cellar. And all the shelves, you would open it up. It was also a tornado shelter. You'd open it up, you go downstairs, and you're in a cooler root cellar with, like, the walls were reinforced with railroad ties, and then there were shelves, and you have all the jars. And like my grandmother, she would plant in the spring, harvest in the summer, can like crazy. And then that's what you would eat in the fall and the winter. They never said, I'm a survivalist.
Exactly.
It was just like, of course we're going to store food. Otherwise we all die. You know, I mean, these are common skills back in the day. So I like your approach to that. They're totally common skills, and living off grid it's a critical skill right now. And of course I like to add decentralized technology to that mix, you know, to have local AI or even eventually like local robotics and local power storage as the technology becomes, you know, capable of doing that. We're not quite there yet on some of those. But Seth, any final thoughts before we wrap this up today? This has been fascinating already.
Yeah, well, one thing is I just want to thank you for what you've done. I've learned so much from you. I mean, even another example, my wife picked up a pan handle that was actually sitting over on one of our flames. She didn't realize it. She picked up a hot pan, burned her hand so bad. Ooh. And we're looking for solutions for this. And we're thinking, okay, what about DMSO? Can we use DMSO? So I went and asked ChatGPT and did some research, and it's like, okay, no, don't do that. I said, hold on. She goes, Seth, go ask Enoch. So I went to Enoch, went to your AI, and it gave us the exact way of creating a mixture of DMSO and aloe from our aloe plant to create a salve for her hand. And so I just want to let you know that's why I started the show by showing some of these products, right? The silver gel that you've made, we use this all the time, whether it's for a bug bite or a burn or a little cut, it doesn't matter. So I just that's part of what I want to say in kind of closing is just thank you for doing what you're doing. And you've been an inspiration for me of don't just be a talking head, be someone that's actually trying to build systems to help people, whether you're building products, whether you're building digital infrastructure, platforms, AI, whatever it is, do something purposeful. And so I just want to thank you for that because you've been very, very helpful in this journey. Well,
thank you, Seth.
You know,
let me just mention the engine that you're referring to, because, you know, we changed the name. It used to be called Enoch, and now it's Bright Answers. Right. So here it is. It's brightanswers.ai, knowledge without censorship. And yeah, we are constantly upgrading that also with more books as reference items and more science papers. And then the other thing that we have just announced, you'll love this, you know, on our brightlearn.ai, we now have over 45,000 books and 10,000 authors. If you click here on audiobooks, we now have downloadable full-length audiobooks. Like the entire book is full-length audio. You can download them all for free, and we're producing maybe 15 to 20 per day. So the chlorine dioxide audiobook, vanishing vaults, like how to hide your gold, cancer. Here's DMSO unlocked.
There you go.
There you go. So we're doing
Foucault.
Yeah, there's Foucault. Yeah, awaken your inner middle finger. Yeah, that's a very valuable philosophy. So now, and your digital doctor, et cetera. So we're constantly, you know, trying to add more resources for people to be able to get more decentralized and have the PDF files and have the MP3 files, so you have your local knowledge. And I prioritize this book, Choke Point, The Strait of Hormuz, so people can understand the Strait of Hormuz. But I didn't write that book. Somebody else here, what's their name? Shazia M. created that book. And then I just queued it up for the audiobook. So you can just download the audiobook right here. So anyway, that's what we're doing. And I love the fact that you and I both are creating tools and platforms for people to help people get prepared. This is how we both help build community too, you know, and kind of give back to the world that has given us so much. So thank you for all that you do, Seth.
Absolutely. And I think one, I guess, kind of final closing statement is that it's really important, and this is, again, through my own struggles and in my own shortfalls in this, to be doing all this stuff without fear. And that's, it's not easy. I mean, to me, the only way to not have fear living in the world that we live in right now is just to have faith, the classic faith over fear. But as evil as this stuff is, I think that fundamentally, we have to remember that Satan didn't kick God out of heaven, right? It was vice versa. So I think that anything that is allowed to happen on this earth, it's being allowed to happen by the Creator, by God. And I think that ultimately that's the true power. If you look at these people that we're up against, I don't think a lot of them even have human souls. I'm not sure what's inside of these bodies that are walking around, but inside of us, we have this divine spark. We have this soul that God gave us. And I think God chose us to be here. And so I think it's really important, though, to just be able to rise above that fear, because the fear, it lowers our frequency, it clouds our judgment, it causes us to do things that are not godly, right? And so I think that's the one of the keys in this. And that's why even though this is a pretty heavy conversation, you and I are both smiling. Like if someone didn't hear the actual audio to this conversation, just watch the video only, they think, wow, these guys are probably talking about, like their gardens and happy things. And, so we're covering heavy topics, but we have to be able to do it in a way that we can still find hope in the future. And so that's what I'm trying my best to do, is to still have hope. And as my one, the podcast kind of slogan is to be a voice of reason in a world gone mad. And that's what I'm trying my best to do.
Yeah, I like that slogan. That makes sense. And, you've listened to a lot of my work over the years, and you've never heard me come from a place of fear either, right? It's always been, well, here's a heads up, here's a warning, but here's how to prepare. And when you're prepared, you don't have to be fearful because you know how to handle all these things as you do. You're one of the best prepared people around, you and your wife and your family. So great job. And thank you for sharing your time with us today. And I want to remind people again, your website is SethWholehouse.com. Let me bring it up here. There we go, SethWholehouse.com. And then for those of you who want to see more of my interviews, they're at brightvideos.com. So thank you so much, Seth. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Lots of fun, except for the Disneyland part, but the rest of it was all good.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike.
Okay.
Sorry for that little curveball.
That's all right. That's all right. All right, thank you. And thank you all for watching. Mike Adams here of brightvideos.com. Take care. Yes, the world is getting crazy, but here at the Health Ranger store, we're putting together a survival supply assortment for you. If you go to healthrangerstore.com/survival, you'll see what we put together for you, including iodine and IOSAT. That's a specific brand name of potassium iodide that's FDA approved. Or we have the nascent iodine here, which is less expensive in terms of the iodine that you get. These are available in case things go nuclear. It's clear that you will not be able to find any of this for sale anywhere. All the inventories will be wiped out, like what happened after Fukushima in 2011. So if you want to get your hands on some iodine, this is a chance to get it right now. healthrangerstore.com/survival. In addition, we have many other survival items for you here, including some silver solutions, some spirulina available in bulk and at a discount, and then a large assortment of storable organic food that's laboratory tested, including our Ranger Bucket sets. Here's a 195-day supply. We've got the mini buckets, and we've also got number 10 cans available of freeze-dried fruits and vegetables and other things like miso soup powder. Here's some of the buckets. There's a big variety available. Here are some of the number 10 cans right here. Remember, a lot of people are missing fruit. They don't have enough vitamin C in their storable food. So, getting bananas and pineapples and strawberries especially, again, certified organic, freeze-dried. That is the highest quality with the highest nutrient preservation that you can get in any kind of a storable food format. All of this is available right now and so much more. Just go to healthrangerstore.com/survival. And because the freeze-dried foods last for so long, even if you don't eat them this year or next year, just keep them on the shelf. They're going to last a very long time with good preservation, a long shelf life, and they will have value no matter what happens in the world. Now, of course, I'm praying for peace. I'm praying for de-escalation. I don't want to see World War III break out, and I certainly don't want it to go nuclear. But we're dealing with insane times and insane leaders and insane situations. Who knows what could happen tomorrow or next week? Disruptions could happen here in the United States. There could be, domestic attacks that disrupt supply chains here in the U.S. So stock up early, stock up now, get your emergency food, emergency medicine, iodine, anything else that you think that you might need. Get it now. And by doing so, by shopping with us, you'll be supporting our platforms and our AI engines that we offer for free. That's funded in part by sales from our store. So shop with us at healthrangerstore.com/survival and help yourself get prepared, and also help us bring you more free tools and platforms that can keep you informed no matter what happens in the world. I'm Mike Adams, the Health Ranger. Thank you for your support. God bless you all. Take care.